For years, millions of people started their mornings with the same familiar face. And Curry became known as a journalist who stayed calm during chaos and compassionate during tragedy. She reported from war zones, disaster areas, and places where hope was often difficult to find. Viewers trusted her because she seemed to care more about people than headlines. But while she spent decades telling other people's stories, a very different story was unfolding behind the scenes of her own career. It was a story of quiet determination, unexpected setbacks, and one public moment that left millions asking the same question. How could one of the most respected journalists on television suddenly lose the job she had spent decades earning? The answer is far more complicated than a simple ratings report. It is a story about resilience, dignity, and what happens when success collides with circumstances beyond a person's control. This is the story of Curry. Long before Curry became one of America's most respected television journalists, she was simply a young girl trying to find where she belonged. She was born in 1956 while her father, an American sailor, was stationed in Japan. Her mother was Japanese, and their marriage began during a difficult period shortly after the Second World War. At that time, families like theirs often faced prejudice from both cultures. Growing up, and experienced what it felt like to be different. Because her father served in the military, the family moved often. Every new town meant another school, another classroom, and another chance to start over. Making friends was never easy. Instead of always feeling accepted, she often felt like an outsider looking in. Those early experiences quietly shaped her personality. Rather than becoming loud to get attention, she learned to observe. She listened carefully. She noticed emotions that others sometimes overlooked. That ability to understand people would later become one of her greatest strengths as a journalist. As a teenager, she discovered that storytelling could change the way people saw the world. She admired reporters who traveled into dangerous places, not to become famous, but to help others understand suffering, hope, and resilience. She dreamed of becoming that kind of journalist herself. After studying journalism in college, she began working at local television stations. The hours were long, the pay was modest, and success was anything but guaranteed. She covered local events, learned how to report under pressure, and slowly earned the trust of both viewers and newsroom leaders. Every assignment became another lesson. Every challenge made her stronger. Few people noticed the sacrifices happening behind the scenes, but believed patience would eventually lead to opportunity. She could not have known that those quiet years were preparing her for a career unlike almost any other. Yet the biggest opportunity of her life was still waiting just around the corner, and it would change everything. Long before Curry became one of America's most respected television journalists, she was simply a young girl trying to find where she belonged. She was born in 1956 while her father, an American sailor, was stationed in Japan. Her mother was Japanese, and their marriage began during a difficult period shortly after the Second World War. At that time, families like theirs often faced prejudice from both cultures. Growing up, and experienced what it felt like to be different. Because her father served in the military, the family moved often. Every new town meant another school, another classroom, and another chance to start over. Making friends was never easy. Instead of always feeling accepted, she often felt like an outsider looking in. Those early experiences quietly shaped her personality. Rather than becoming loud to get attention, she learned to observe. She listened carefully. She noticed emotions that others sometimes overlooked. That ability to understand people would later become one of her greatest strengths as a journalist. As a teenager, she discovered that storytelling could change the way people saw the world. She admired reporters who traveled into dangerous places, not to become famous, but to help others understand suffering, hope, and resilience. She dreamed of becoming that kind of journalist herself. After studying journalism in college, she began working at local television stations. The hours were long, the pay was modest, and success was anything but guaranteed. She covered local events, learned how to report under pressure, and slowly earned the trust of both viewers and newsroom leaders. Every assignment became another lesson. Every challenge made her stronger. Few people noticed the sacrifices happening behind the scenes, but believed patience would eventually lead to opportunity. She could not have known that those quiet years were preparing her for a career unlike almost any other. Yet the biggest opportunity of her life was still waiting just around the corner, and it would change everything. Continue Chapter 2, Climbing to the Top of Television News. Approximately 340 words. And Curry's career did not rise overnight. It was built one assignment at a time, often in places where most people would never want to go. While some television personalities became known for celebrity interviews or entertainment stories, and earned respect by reporting from the front lines of history, she believed the most important stories were the ones that revealed how ordinary people survived extraordinary hardships. Over the years, she traveled to countries affected by war, famine, earthquakes, and political unrest. She interviewed families who had lost everything, children searching for hope, and rescue workers risking their lives to save strangers. No matter where she reported from, her calm voice and gentle approach helped people feel comfortable enough to tell their stories. Viewers noticed something different about her. She rarely tried to make herself the center of attention. Instead, she allowed the people she interviewed to speak honestly, often giving them space during emotional moments rather than rushing to the next question. That quiet style became her signature and earned her widespread respect. Her dedication eventually led to national television. Joining NBC News opened the door to even greater opportunities. She became a familiar face on programs watched by millions and built a reputation as one of the network's most trusted journalists. Years of hard work finally seemed to be paying off. Then came the moment she had spent decades working toward. In 2011, Curry was chosen to become co-anchor of NBC's Today show, one of the most prestigious jobs in American television. For many journalists, it represented the highest level of success. From the outside, everything appeared perfect. Viewers celebrated her promotion, colleagues congratulated her, and her lifelong dream had finally become reality. But behind the bright studio lights, another story was quietly beginning. Pressure inside the newsroom was growing. Ratings had become a constant concern, relationships were becoming strained, and difficult decisions were already being discussed behind closed doors. No one watching at home could see the storm that was slowly gathering, and before long, it would change Curry's life forever. For Curry, becoming co-anchor of Today should have marked the happiest chapter of her career. She had spent decades earning the trust of viewers, reporting from some of the world's most dangerous places, and proving herself as one of NBC's most respected journalists. But less than a year after stepping into the role, troubling rumors began spreading throughout the media. Newspapers and television critics reported that the program's ratings were falling. Every morning broadcast was analyzed, and every change was discussed by entertainment reporters. As the speculation grew, and found herself at the center of a story she had never wanted to be part of. Reports claimed that network executives were considering major changes, but very little was said publicly. Instead, questions continued to grow while answers remained hidden behind closed office doors. Then came the moment that millions of viewers still remember. In June 2012, and appeared on live television to announce that she would be leaving her position as co-anchor. Fighting back tears, she thanked the audience that had welcomed her into their homes for so many years. Her voice shook as she expressed gratitude, and for a brief moment, the polished world of morning television felt deeply personal. It was clear that this was not simply another career move. It was the painful end of a dream she had spent decades pursuing. The emotional farewell immediately sparked public reaction. Social media filled with messages of support. Loyal viewers questioned why such a respected journalist was leaving so suddenly. Many believed she had not been given enough time in the role, while others wondered whether problems behind the scenes were far more complicated than anyone realized. Throughout the growing controversy, and refused to criticize her colleagues or publicly blame the network. She remained composed, choosing dignity over confrontation. That quiet restraint only deepened the public's sympathy. As the headlines continued, one question refused to disappear. Wasn't Curry simply the victim of declining ratings, or was there a much larger story hidden behind the cameras that viewers had yet to discover? Leaving the Today Show did not bring an end to the public attention. In many ways, it was only the beginning. 4 months after Curry's emotional farewell, newspapers, television programs, and online commentators continued to debate what had happened behind the scenes. Every new report seemed to offer another theory, but very few people truly knew what had taken place inside the network. For Ann, the experience was deeply personal. Unlike many career setbacks that happen quietly, hers unfolded in front of millions of viewers. Every headline reminded the public of her departure, while every interview about the Today Show seemed to bring her name back into the conversation. It was impossible to escape the constant speculation. Many people who had admired her reporting felt heartbroken watching someone known for kindness become the focus of such intense public scrutiny. Yet through it all, and rarely spoke with anger. She chose not to attack her former co-workers or respond to every rumor circulating in the media. Instead, she maintained the same calm professionalism that had defined her reporting for decades. That decision was not always easy. Anyone who has spent years working toward a dream knows how painful it can be to see it disappear. For Ann, the loss was not just about a television job. It was about saying goodbye to a role she had earned through decades of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. Her experience also revealed a difficult truth about the television industry. Success is not determined by talent alone. Ratings, executive decisions, changing business priorities, and public perception can reshape careers almost overnight. Even the most respected journalists are not immune to those realities. As time passed, and focused less on defending her past and more on deciding what kind of future she wanted to build. Instead of allowing disappointment to define her, she quietly began searching for a new purpose. Few people realized it then, but the most meaningful chapter of her career was still ahead. The path she would choose next would remind audiences why they had trusted her in the first place. After leaving the Today Show, many people wondered whether Curry would ever return to the spotlight. Some believed the painful public departure might mark the end of her career. Others expected her to speak out against those she believed had treated her unfairly. But Ann chose a very different path. Instead of chasing another high-profile morning television role, she returned to the kind of journalism that had first inspired her decades earlier. She focused on stories that mattered, not because they generated headlines, but because they gave a voice to people who were too often forgotten. It was a quiet but powerful reminder of why she had become a journalist in the first place. And continued reporting from around the world, covering humanitarian crises, global conflicts, and major events that affected ordinary families. She interviewed world leaders, medical experts, and survivors of tragedy, always bringing the same calm presence and thoughtful questions that had earned viewers' trust throughout her career. Her work was never about creating dramatic television. It was about helping audiences understand the human side of the news. In 2018, she launched We'll Meet Again, a documentary series that reunited people whose lives had been forever changed by extraordinary moments. Each episode focused on hope, gratitude, and the lasting impact of human kindness. The series reflected the values that had always guided her career: compassion, empathy, and the belief that every person has a story worth telling. As the years passed, public opinion also began to shift. Many viewers looked back at Ann's departure with fresh eyes. Instead of remembering only the controversy, they remembered her decades of thoughtful reporting and her unwavering professionalism. Her reputation was no longer defined by one difficult year, but by a lifetime of meaningful journalism. Without seeking revenge or demanding attention, Ann slowly rebuilt her career on her own terms. She proved that success is not always measured by the size of an audience, but by the impact a person leaves behind. Yet, just as the public began to see her story differently, new revelations inside the television industry would cause many people to revisit what had really happened behind the scenes. Several years after Curry left the Today Show, the conversation surrounding her departure began to change. What had once been viewed mainly as a story about television ratings and network decisions slowly became part of a much larger discussion about workplace culture in the media industry. In 2017, serious allegations of sexual misconduct were made against Matt Lauer, and former Today co-anchor. NBC conducted an internal review, and Lauer was dismissed from the network. The news shocked millions of viewers who had watched him for years, and it also prompted many people to look back at the events surrounding his departure with new questions. During interviews, and spoke carefully and respectfully. She said she was not surprised by the allegations because there had been an atmosphere where some women had experienced inappropriate behavior. At the same time, she avoided making herself the focus of the story. Rather than speaking with bitterness, she emphasized the importance of listening to people who come forward with difficult experiences and creating workplaces where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Her measured response earned admiration from many journalists and viewers. Instead of using the moment to settle old scores, she stayed true to the values that had guided her throughout her career. She reminded people that journalism is about seeking the truth with fairness and compassion, even when the truth is uncomfortable. As more information about the culture inside major television networks became public, many viewers reconsidered his own experience. Some who had once believed her departure was simply the result of poor ratings began to wonder whether the situation had been far more complicated than it first appeared. While no single explanation answered every question, public perception gradually shifted. Through it all, and never allowed herself to be defined by controversy. She continued focusing on meaningful reporting and humanitarian work, quietly proving that integrity can outlast even the loudest headlines. By this point, her story had become about much more than one television job. It had become a lesson in resilience, and it raised one final question. How would history ultimately remember Curry's remarkable career? Today, at 69 years old, Curry's story looks very different from the way it did on that emotional morning in 2012. Time has a way of changing perspective. The headlines that once focused on controversy have faded, but the values she carried throughout her career have remained remarkably consistent. For more than 4 decades, and dedicated her life to journalism that placed people before politics, compassion before competition, and truth before personal recognition. She reported from war zones, natural disasters, refugee camps, and communities struggling to rebuild after unimaginable loss. While many television personalities became famous for their opinions and became respected for her willingness to listen, she believed that every person, no matter where they came from, deserved to have their story told with dignity. Looking back, it is clear that her greatest achievement was never simply becoming the co-anchor of the Today Show. That position was an important milestone, but it represented only one chapter in a much larger journey. Her true legacy was built through thousands of interviews, countless hours spent in dangerous places, and an unwavering commitment to giving a voice to those who were too often overlooked. The painful end of her time on morning television could have defined her career. Instead, she refused to let disappointment become the final chapter. She continued reporting, producing thoughtful documentaries, and supporting humanitarian causes around the world. Rather than allowing public setbacks to shape her identity, she remained faithful to the principles that had guided her from the very beginning. Perhaps that is why so many people still speak of Curry with admiration. Her story reminds us that success is not measured only by titles, ratings, or public applause. It is measured by integrity, resilience, and the way someone treats others when life becomes most difficult. In the end, the tragedy of Curry is not simply that she lost a position she worked decades to earn. It is that a journalist known for empathy endured one of television's most painful public departures. Yet even through heartbreak, she never lost the qualities that made millions trust her in the first place. And maybe that is the greatest lesson her journey leaves behind. Careers can change overnight. Headlines eventually disappear. But kindness, dignity, and compassion have a way of lasting far longer than any television broadcast ever could. If Curry's story teaches us anything, it is this: True character is often revealed not during life's greatest victories, but in the quiet strength shown after its most painful losses. And that is a legacy no headline can ever take away.